welcome back to the Blue Max podcast, my friend.
Great to be back.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing.
We didn't get a chance to catch up yet, so we're gonna be catching up on air. But how are you doing with the apocalypse? How are you at home?
I've just been hanging out at home. It's hard to get into the routine, but
Hmm.
I've mastered it now. I guess the first
Yeah.
week was completely wasted, where you're just looking at the news every 5 minutes, and things
Hmm.
are changing so fast where you're just distracted, right? But
Yes.
I've kind of just gotten into a routine, and things are back to normal as normal could be.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to normal as normal could be. So you're used to working at home and doing freelance work, right?
Yeah,
And building
exactly.
your own companies.
So the difference with that is at least I can go out and meet people. It's harder to do Zoom calls all the time for meetings.
Okay.
It's harder to network a bit. So that's the big change. Other than that, it's pretty much regular. The big difference is normally I would like go out to a Starbucks or Quantum Coffee and just like work from there for a bit. Now I'm just at home all day, so that's the big difference.
How's that? Is that taking a toll on you, being at home all the time?
No, I think I've just gotten used to it.
Perfect, man. So what's the latest and the greatest? What are you working on?
Well, right now other than like my own startup and contracting and stuff, what I really started
Hmm.
doing was I saw a bunch of just unemployment happening in the tech community everywhere and just globally
Yeah.
everywhere, right? So I put out, I've just been taking calls probably like 4 or 5 a day for the past couple days now. I think I've done almost 24 calls now, where
Okay.
it's chatting with people who lost their job and are in, the people that call me, they're kind of in like a very interesting mindset. I would say like a growth mindset where they realize that they lost their job, it's shitty, but they also realize that this is an opportunity for them to kind of start a new path, right? A new career path, or do something that they've always wanted to do, but
Hmm.
haven't really had the chance. So a good one is just yesterday I was talking to an individual, and he is a salesperson in America somewhere, and decided after losing his job, had decided to start a tech startup. For the past 2 years on the side, he's been doing programming, and so it's not that he's just like suddenly changing his career, but now he's been doing programming for fun. Now he actually wants to start a small startup, a business, right? So he wanted to run by his idea and ask me about where the steps to even get started. So it's been interesting, right? And I've been doing that, and I think that's been great. I had one woman where she got laid off from a university, and now she wants to start her own yoga business because she's been thinking about this for a long time now, and
Hmm.
this is kind of giving her the push. And so, I was explaining to her how not to go to a contractor to build a website, just go to like Webflow or Wix, all these like little hacks that us engineers we figure out along the way, kind of just passing that knowledge along.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the fact that you're doing that, kudos to you. What have you been seeing? Like, what type of people are losing their jobs? What type of people are being hired?
It's actually, I've seen such a wide spectrum. There's no real pattern.
Hmm.
I've had calls from around the world, so that's something interesting. It's not just North America that's has job loss. I've had some calls from India. I've had some calls from Europe, and even some parts of, I think, Mexico. I had 1 or 2 calls, right? And it's kind of everywhere. So it's interesting because the coronavirus or COVID, it kind of brought everyone together. It's kind of like an equalizer for the world, where it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It's affecting everyone, right? And so I have
Yeah,
people from all different demographics just like calling me and chatting with me about, I want to learn this, or I want to start this. What advice do you have? So it's that's what I'm seeing.
amazing. So. This is what kind of synergistic to what we've been doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been doing this kind of the same kind of stuff. So with BloomX over here, we've been calling up people who came up to our podcast, partners that we worked with over the past 2 weeks. And really, man, I had conversations with about 30 plus companies. Similarly to how you're having conversations with people who lost their jobs or looking for new
Right.
opportunities, we're talking to startups who are facing disruption in the market space, because 3 months, 4 months of their runway now is in white clean. Conferences are gone, right? Events are gone, meetups are gone.
Yep.
They're working from home, completely new reality they shifted to. And it's what we're seeing is like a lot of companies are falling into two buckets, right? One that are completely disrupted and trying to figure out what's going on, and in that they might either have a cash flow keep going on, or might have to put stop to a lot of activities and let go of a lot of people. And then the second bucket, as much as rare to find, but we're finding more and more of them, is companies whose markets are booming,
Yep.
almost seemingly out of nowhere because of this, because a huge market opportunities opened up. I mean, think about it. Over 1 billion people connected by internet are now experiencing the same kind of issues. Working from home, their business is disrupted, right? New process and new infrastructure required. So a lot of companies are offering services that may have not been flying like a month ago are suddenly crushing,
Right.
crushing, and they can't handle their growth. So what we've been doing on our end is trying to pair up these companies who now are experiencing rapid growth, bring in the right skill sets to be able to help them fill that, right? To fulfill that growth curve. For example, we have companies that are getting now sales calls coming in out of the blue, or natively people download the app and using it because they're searching for that kind of service.
Right.
And they need to know how to handle that traffic.
Yeah.
So maybe we could definitely help after this call talk about that as well.
Sure.
About how we can pair those kind of people together with these companies that are doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point. You're seeing this event happen in history right now. I mean, you've seen this happen before, right? You've seen this with just reading about what happened during the Spanish flu and what happened during the Great Depression. Things change, and there's always new industries that form after this. There's always new businesses that are going to be formed. The world's not ending. As much as we like to joke about it being the apocalypse, it's not, right? It's just that the world will change, and there will be, whenever with change, there's always good change and bad change. There will be good change that comes from this and really bad change that comes from this. So, most companies that I see are trying to contribute to the good change. They're trying to bring people, trying to make people safer, or trying to provide assistance to people. And those businesses will thrive, definitely.
Yeah. And hopefully, right? Like we need a market to recover. It might be a new market. I think from people we're talking to, it's like we're living in a new reality.
Yeah.
Where there's no real going back to how things were, even if there's state of emergency is called off.
Things won't ever be normal again, right? This will be a new normal. I suspect that a lot of businesses will realize that you don't need a physical office, right? One of the companies that I work for, we're like 5 people in an office, but we've been fine 2 weeks without an office. So there will be a discussion in the next couple of weeks of, when all this ends, do we really need an office? Like, do we really need to pay $4,000 in rent, or can we just like save that $4,000 and maybe just pay ourselves more, right? So there's a lot of things that companies will have to think about. And this is kind of also on the flip side, a lot of employees who've probably thought that they can never remote work are probably going to go, well, I remote worked fine for the past 2 weeks. So now I can apply for remote working jobs and maybe move to a cheaper place, right? Maybe I want to move to Mexico and work for a company in San Francisco. That's a great standard of living there. So you can, you earn a lot, you earn US dollars and you pay cheap rent. So I think we'll see that transition happen in the next 6 months after coronavirus is over. I don't know when it's going to finish. Once that's done, we're going to start seeing people kind of make these decisions.
No, definitely. So what do you think about that timeline? When do you think this virus situation is going to be over?
A month ago, everyone on my Twitter feed was an epidemiologist, and now they're in. So I can't comment on any of those because I have neither. But just like looking at the trends and stuff, the data's out there. Everyone keeps talking about this apex point happening sometime mid-April. I'm not sure. I think it might be wishful thinking. I think the big here that I see is that there's a lot of people that just won't stay at home, right? They have this typically it's like, hey, what are you doing Friday night? Oh no, I just want to stay at home and watch TV. And now people have a chance to stay at home and watch TV and they don't want to. They just want to go out and play. So people like that are kind of delaying this timeline. It's ironic. If they just stay at home for 2 weeks, things will go back to normal sooner. But I'm not sure when this will be over, but I think we'll probably go towards June, July, August. It'll carry on for a while. And I think the effects will resonate for years to come.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It's gonna be crazy looking back at how this has culturally and economically changed us.
for sure.
Um, because already companies, I'm talking with like big companies who are saying, why would we go back to paying $30,000 a month on office space? We're
Exactly.
functioning virtually, right?
Exactly.
Like all these companies that were like, oh, how can we transition away from this? We can't. If people, you don't bring people into an office space, you can't control their actions. But now they have to, and they're
Yeah.
realizing they can still get stuff done on a lower cost basis. And a lot of people are liking this like new work-life integration rather than work-life balance,
Yeah.
where work is different, life is different, right? Some people are actually enjoying this, where they can roll out of bed, start working, set up the timelines, and intermix with cooking and living with family.
We spoke about this last time I was on the podcast,
Yeah,
and I think work-life balance has been kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, where people think that 5 p.m. hits and that's it, no more work, right? But reality, if you're someone that wants to push your career and in anything, tech, arts, doesn't matter what you're doing, there is real no work-life balance. What there is uh, it's just constant juggle. It's more juggling rather than balancing, right? Where you're just
yep,
about work probably for 3 hours, and then you can take 2 hours off and do something with your family, right? Cook dinner together, and then go back to working, right? And I think that's how people, like you said, people are realizing that's actually good, versus this like 5 p.m. hits. That's it. I'm not gonna do work anymore. And regarding remote working, I think what will be interesting to see is how creativity is affected by this. While I'm a big proponent for working remotely, and I do it all the time, I do find that there is merit to actually being in a room together with people, and because creativity does end up sparking there. Just two
yep,
people talking over Slack doesn't really do it. It's sitting there with someone and just brainstorming ideas or having a discussion where ideas can just kind of form together, right? Sometimes on Slack, you have an idea, but you're kind of hesitant to send that idea over because you really don't want to have the discussion right now, right? But when you're talking in real time, you kind of that idea just kind of comes out of your mouth, and then it might spur something else. So there will have to be a balance of that. I don't think that remote working 100% is the way to go. I think there will be like 80% remote, 20%. I think we might actually, another business that might just suddenly start growing is meeting room spaces, right? Kind of where ad hoc, you can pay monthly, kind of like a lot more
sorry,
sane,
that's my dog in the background, my sister's dog.
kind of like a more saner business model where you can just like pay a monthly fee and go get a meeting room whenever you want with a bunch of people, right? So we might see more of those businesses come out of this.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so many things to talk about, right? Like, I absolutely agree. Like, I'm a salesperson, so like, I love talking to people in face to face. In fact, like, I will push prospects or people I want to talk to as much as possible to meet face to face because there's so much more transfer of trust and reliability,
Yeah.
right, between the two when that happens. And when you like when you close a sale in that kind of manner where you've met, you're shaking hands with the person, you shared a meal or a beer together or like a beverage, like it's much different sense of feeling behind that deal than it is in just a regular transaction.
Yeah, that's how we've evolved that way, right? I bet you if we were to
Yeah,
put us in an MRI, and the MRI is recording our brain patterns while we're on Slack versus while we're eating a meal together, there will be different hormones that run through our body, right? That will
yeah.
make us make different decisions and form a
Mhm.
better bond. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called Babies that came out, and they were talking about how oxytocin helps a lot in terms of like bonding two people together. And it doesn't matter. Previously, you thought that this was just the mother that bonds with her son,
Yep, yeah.
with the child, but it actually could be a man too. They had two
Mhm.
gay men who adopted a child, and the same levels of oxy were in their system. So it's just all around bonding, and it's just a evolutionary trait. So you can't kind of replace that with Slack or Microsoft Teams. This just has to. People will still have to meet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is the kind of reality that is kind of forcing this issue upon us even earlier, right? Like one of the bigger issues is with this screen addiction. There's an age where children who see people eye to eye, they get trained that way, and it's a comfort level that happens. And if you miss a stage or don't have enough interaction, your brain isn't programmed. The reward system doesn't look into the eye to eye contact. And most of the kids, especially like the generations go down, like generation I think Z we're on now, is like they're having less and less eye contact situations because they're more screen based. That people aren't looking people face to face and they're talking because they're not been programmed almost, right? But since through that social contact,
right,
with people.
In a wild thought experiment, do Generation Z have an evolutionary advantage during the pandemic, right?
Exactly. So I mean, I think what's really benefiting is the machine age, right?
Yes.
The rise of machines being able to be the interface between humans and to provide a different layer of transactability between us. So that's really what's being heralded here is people being forced to rely more on this,
right,
rather than that face to face, shaking hands and meeting face to face, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing is the power behind it. Like we have now the capability because we're doing virtual podcasts now, video podcasts.
Right.
We can now do in 2 to 3 weeks what the amount of content it took us a year to do.
Of course.
It's easier to meet people. It's much easier to do this, to schedule this and do it. But to do this pre-COVID-19 would have been an issue because people were like, oh, this is a Zoom call. Like it's not as valued as coming into a set with 4K cameras and all this stuff. Like the value we provided was this amazing appeal. Hey, come here.
Right.
But now it's like, we can't do this. So the standard has changed for people, the mindset.
Yeah, go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, what COVID's done is it's kind of amplified the stuff that doesn't work, right? And stuff that you could do better. So in your case, this is a good way of doing podcasts actually, versus me coming down to the studio, you renting out a studio and all that stuff. So this works great for you. And I'm sure there's going to be dozens and dozens of businesses that realize that, you know what, the way we were doing things was broken. And we were doing things because we thought that was the only way of doing it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like I am sure the consulting business that I work for, we don't really need an office, right? Mm-hmm. Our clients are all remote. So the office is just there as a token placeholder, right? And just because of societal norms, we have an office. So businesses like ours and podcasts and a lot of other tech businesses are probably going to realize that, you know what, you don't need, like accountants. Do accountants really need to be at the office all the time, right? I don't know. I don't think so. Unless you're an accountant that's dealing with clients. But if you're just doing like tax and a bunch of other boring stuff that I find boring, you don't really need to be in an office. So businesses like those will probably go remote for sure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And like talking about that, right? The change, even after coming back from this evolution, I think the real winners here are like the co-working spaces that can survive this. Because it's like if you survive this and come back and suddenly people don't want to go to office anymore, people will still need to have like meetup credits or boardroom credits and go and meet up, have a boardroom or meet face to face. It's gonna be a trend. It's gonna come back, right?
It will.
And then the co-working spaces that kind of survive are ones we're going to benefit from this.
Yeah.
But talking about that, like one of the guests that came on just had a really great story. He said about the Spanish flu that you mentioned earlier, right? The Spanish flu lasted in our environment for about 3 years before it kind of like subsided. Mm-hmm. And that's one due to human intervention by drugs and vaccines, but also it just kind of naturally subsided as the infection rates went up, and then people who died off, and people who could survive with antibodies stayed on. But it took 3 years for it to come out and get out of our system. So it took after the 3 years, it 2 to 3 years again for people to get used to coming outside and shaking hands again and doing regular business. Right, it depopulated entire cities in parts of Europe, and it caused huge disruptions. So comparing that to this is that each month that goes by might mean a month or two of recovery for just people's behavior to get back to normal, quote unquote, right?
I believe so, and I think that's definitely going to happen. Like this year, pretty much, I think everyone will spend most of their time indoors this year. And I keep hearing about a massive worldwide coronavirus party that will happen eventually once we've gone past this. But I actually don't think it will probably happen. I think people will kind of be freaked out about it,
Mm-hmm.
especially as the death rates start to rise. If the United States actually gets to 100, 200,000 people that have died, that is a big deal, right?
That's
Like
a
that
big deal.
number is tiny compared to the population of USA, but that is that's a massive number, right? And the ripple effect that 200,000 deaths will have is wild on the economy, on just people's mental health. Um, it's kind of like in Avengers where like Thanos snaps half of America, and they're just kind of like there's tons of like group meetings and grief counseling and stuff. That's what's going to happen in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people aren't going to party once this is over. I think there's going to be like you said, couple of years of just like recovery of people trying to get back to normal. And maybe in like 5 years, 6 years, we'll kind of have this like new norm if we can even find it. Because I think along with all this technology stuff, there's also a negative aspect of it where you'll find a lot more companies, a lot more people open to giving up more privacy and more data for the sake of good health, right?
Yeah.
It's in China, I was just reading that they have drones flying around, and if they catch you without a mask, they will like basically yell at you, right? A
Yep.
speaker will turn on and yell at you. And so, while I don't think it can happen in North America, but a lot more subtle stuff can happen in North America. People might be more willing to give up, their health data, their Fitbit data to the government to track them to see if they're about to develop a flu or any sort of sickness. So like
Yep.
these subtle things add up, and then in like 10 years, we might just be in a place in society where we're not as draconian as China, but we are giving up as much as information as China is, as Chinese citizens
Mm.
are to the government. So it's going to be a interesting balance, and I think there's a lot more
So
people.
I guess my question is, does it have to go to a government, right? Can it go to some kind of decentralized system, right?
Well, that's the hope, right? But
Mhm.
there's a sinister thing behind this, which is underlying in everything, which is money, right? And
Yeah.
the
Okay.
government, private businesses, you're going to have all these big tech companies say, cool, we have the infrastructure to deal with this, right? Decentralization and stuff, no one really is the number one player there, and no one really has all that funding. And as much as I would love to open source, you're not going to get a million engineers or even 100,000 engineers working in open source, dedicating resources to build server farms to handle all this data. Like we're talking about
Mm.
big data. If everyone is even sending like their heart rate up to the government, for example, to monitor for sicknesses, that's a lot of data. So decentralization is wishful thinking, I think. I think what we
Yeah.
will see is, uh, governments working with big companies like Amazon that are already have the infrastructure in place and the technology in place to start capitalizing on this.
No, absolutely. I think that you're absolutely right. The private giants are going to really take advantage of the situation where because they have the infrastructure to deploy this right now.
Yeah, they're in a prime position right now. Like
Yeah.
they've already been able to deploy this, and they already are doing this for, Amazon has a big contract with the CIA and NSA. And then there's that whole JEDI contract with the Pentagon that Microsoft has. So these guys already have the infrastructure to handle a shit ton of data, right? So you're not going to get, a decentralization like IPFS or any of these technologies suddenly get all this funding to kind of deploy all this server space, and everyone in the world's going to install IPFS and go dedicate 5 GB of their hard drive. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
As much as I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
love
yeah.
for it to happen, I think I'm just more of a realist um, for when it comes to this stuff.
Right. So, I mean, one of the topics like that I really like following is the idea of like UBI, open data, and also transparency, right, in organizations. So, I think we really have an opportunity here with the disruptions going on to radically change our society and how we function. And
100%.
like, and the thing is, the fuel, the passion behind it is coming from innovators and entrepreneurs around the world, right? Like people who have already stepped up and saying, what can I do? How can I have an impact? I talked to everyone from investors to like engineers to salespeople. They're like, no, like the first time I'm not looking at things as ROI. The ones who are active in the market right now, they're not looking at revenue. They're just like they know that people are not spending money right now, so they're looking at what impact can I have? What can I do now that can have an impact? And then later when the economy frees up, we can transfer this into a commercialized business or something, right? What are you seeing right now? Like any cool projects that are sticking out?
Before that, I want to add, in a rational world, that is what all countries should be doing also. You
Yeah.
have, in a rational world, all countries should say, look, we're going to stop, and we're going to stop doing what we're doing, and we're going to start producing at mass ventilators, masks, whatever we can to get rid of this, right?
Yeah.
And not only are we going to produce it for ourselves, we're going to produce it for the poor countries. Because the reality is, it might go away from Canada, but it might still linger on in like South Africa, Mexico, these underdeveloped places that don't have access to healthcare as much. And then suddenly it'll make another return, right? But this time it'll be like the sequel where it's mutated and it's like 2 times as worse. And so I think all in a rational economy, that's what needs to happen. Unfortunately, the world is not rational, and we're not going to see that. So it's good that entrepreneurs are stepping up, because that change does happen from even a small thing. And like one of the cool things I saw, I think Trudeau was talking about this the other day, was there was a startup in Waterloo that started building dividers for hospitals, right? So you can keep these quarantine patients separate. Like small little innovations like that go a long way in preventing this. So I think startups and entrepreneurs can go far in helping local societies, and there might be some that even end up helping other countries, but the governments also need to step up. And that's where, when you're talking about UBI and stuff, the government need to take more responsibility here. Definitely. I think Canada's doing a great job, but we could all do better. America's doing like the worst job in the world. Like hands down, America is going to be a great case study on things what not to do. I don't agree with anything what China does, their human rights and everything, terrible country. However, one thing they did really well was get everything just shut down and fix the problem, right? Because I think that's one of the big differences of like a democracy versus an authoritarian.
It's not just China, like almost all Eastern Bloc nations. Almost everyone in Asia, like especially East Asia, South Asia, they're doing an amazing job.
Yeah, I mean, India is questionable, and I say it's questionable because India's infrastructure isn't ready to handle 1.5 billion people shutting down. When I first read it, I thought it was a good idea, and that's mainly because of 2 things. My view of India has been very distorted by watching Bollywood over the years, and I don't pay attention to Indian politics. But when I really started thinking about it, there's a lot of people in India. Like for us, working from home is just that. We're working from home. Now there's some people complaining and whatever, but you know what? In India, working from home is a luxury, right? Because there's so many people in India right now that only go home, and their home is just a shelter that they can sleep in, right? They don't have a fridge. They don't have snacks, like stuff that we just think about. They don't have. All a home is a mattress and probably like a mug of water, right? So now you're forcing those people to stay in that condition. That's not only bad for, how are they going to buy food and stuff? They can't earn money. They're living paycheck to paycheck. But not only that, it's bad for their mental health, right? Yeah. So a system like India, I don't know. I can't speak much to it other than just what I've observed. I don't think the shutting down the whole country, it's a good idea, but I don't know if they went about it the right way, right? Whereas China, if you look at what China did, and I was reading this recently, where China had sort of like an app or a website where you could basically order food and someone would come and deliver this food to you. The government was just handing out food, right? I don't know if charging or what. That I don't know about the economics there, but they had a system in place for this, and it's because they've dealt with this many times, right? So I can see, like, Trump not wanting to shut down the entire country. It makes sense from one aspect, because he's just not, the country doesn't have the infrastructure to provide support to everyone to just like kind of shut down. But that's just kind of what needs to happen. So it's like a catch-22. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so more off on that. Like one of the biggest fears right now is that America, especially if it does not take the necessary steps to contain this within their borders, the virus within their borders, and it goes off to like actually like actually impact the population, like killing 100,000, 200,000 people, or infecting 500,000. And the fear and the animosity and the things that will build up over time will turn the nation kind of like in a downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
And during this period of like inward thinking and dealing with this crisis, they're kind of not ruling the world like they've been. American kind of hegemony is kind of dying down. It has been going down for the past few decades, anyways. But it seems like this is really a transformation in global politics as well.
Of course. And not only is it a transformation for America, like global politics, not just, you have world leaders that are getting sick who might potentially die. You had the finance minister in Germany kill himself. Now, I don't know if there's a deeper conspiracy there, or if he actually just became extremely frustrated and depressed and committed suicide. But you have things that are changing. And typically when you have administration leaving power, there's a handoff, right? And there's a long time to think about how the transition will be. If leaders start dying randomly, then there's no handoff in power, and you're going to have to like kind of adapt, and new rules will come up very quickly. And so, to the point with America specifically, there was a good book that I was actually watching a YouTube video on, called The Shock Doctrine, and this was a video on Intercept.
Naomi Campbell.
Yeah, I think so. And the shock doctrine really talks about when there's crises like this, things that weren't normal just kind of become normal, and policies are accelerated. We already saw Trump, and I don't know how many people have kind of even paid attention, but like migrants and stuff, everything's shut off right now in America. Right? Canada kind of just said we're stopping this, right? And so there's a lot of things that just kind of happen that kind of go unsaid because everyone just wants to live. And so definitely there's going to be a big political change in America. The rational side of me says that people are going to realize that Trump was a bad leader. There was a good article I read, Washington Post and New York Times. You keep hearing Nassim Talib's Black Swan being cited a lot, about how Black Swan, coronavirus is a Black Swan, but the article actually got into a very good point that I actually believe in more. I don't think coronavirus is the Black Swan. I think having Trump and this radicalized alt-right style leadership in power is the Black Swan, right? And these guys have like woefully underprepared to deal with any of this pandemic stuff. Like, even if George Bush was in power, he could have probably dealt with this in a much better way. So the Black Swan is the political climate that has been kind of bubbling for the past few years. And you see this in the UK, you see this in America. Luckily, you don't see this in Canada, right? Canada's been kind of immune to this so far. As much as I don't agree with anything with Doug Ford, he's done a great job. And that kind of shows you about, you don't have to believe in someone's political values for them to not be a good leader. So Doug Ford, Trudeau, these guys have stepped up. They're doing a good job, but yeah, America's going to change. And the garbage thing is, if, as America changes, it's going to change the whole world with it, right? The Canadian economy is going to be impacted severely if the American economy keeps tanking. You're going to have the UK economy tank a lot too, China, everything's going to be affected by America.
Yeah. So let's talk about part of this. Like, the shock doctrine talks a lot about how economic shocks or cultural shocks or wars or natural disasters, they can be used as a catalyst point for great change, right? Whether for good or bad, but for nefarious purposes or for positive purposes, right? This is where radical thinking come into effect. And already we're seeing policies that are already happening, right? Like UBI being discussed and being delivered to, which is almost seemed like impossible. A month ago, it seemed like UBI is just a radical thought, can never happen, but now it seems like it's one of the only things that can do. What's your thoughts on UBI and other radical thoughts that can be applied in this situation?
We talked about this on the podcast when I was there too. I strongly believe there should be a UBI. There's this whole argument about, well, people are just going to waste their money. Well, if they want to, they can, right?
Yeah.
It's better for the economy if they waste their money. But honestly, everyone should get UBI because $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month, that's not enough to pay rent, but that's enough to stop worrying, right?
Yeah.
And I think UBI is not a placeholder to people think you getting UBI means you're going to sit at home, play games all day. No, you're just not going to worry about having to deal with 2-3 jobs, right? You're just going to have to now worry about one job. You're going to have to think about how to be the best at your job, and you're going to have that mental clarity to be able to come at home and deal with family issues, deal with normal everyday stuff that you didn't have time to. There's a great case study. There's been lots of research around poverty actually ending up causing brain changes, right? And poverty actually causes you to stop thinking in a long-term view and start thinking in a very short-term manner. And I think UBI will get rid of that poverty. And over the course of decades, even shorter maybe, you'll start seeing in the human condition, the people that are living in poverty who will finally be able to make decisions that are good for them in the long term. And so I strongly believe, and this might be, I hope it is, coronavirus could be the thing that causes UBI to actually become mainstream. Just a matter of who does it first. Does Canada do it first or America? But I do think it's a great idea. And clearly America can afford it, and so can Canada, because they're able to give money out this way, right? So just don't spend all this money on defense for America, even Canada. So I think this is a good thing for sure.
Absolutely. What about any other radical ideas, right? Is any other big kind of ideas to play right now that you support or think about?
Well, I mean, in general, healthcare. That doesn't seem radical for Canadians, but this seems radical for some weird fucking reason. I don't know what the hell's wrong with them. The idea that I was talking to my friend. She lives in Los Angeles. She used to work in Canada. She's a Canadian, and so she was telling me when she was in Canada, she never had to think about healthcare, right? And growing up, I've grown up in Canada. Even till this moment, I don't really think about what I'm gonna do when I get sick. I just know that I'm gonna go to a doctor and get medicine and I'll be fine, right? But she was telling me that she doesn't think that way anymore because she knows she's gonna have to pay a lot of money, right? And I was traveling. Whenever I travel, I try to find one person. This one poor person I'll find that I will just end up start talking to, right? And this poor guy or girl is gonna be like, shit, this person's gonna talk to me the whole plane ride. But it is true. I will talk to you the whole plane ride, and I will probe you for your entire lifestyle. So last time I was traveling to Washington a couple of months ago, just as coronavirus was growing, the airports were slightly quiet, and I spoke to this guy, and he lives in Washington, I think, or he was traveling to Ohio. I'm not sure, but he was a trucker. And he told me that he is two things. He is divorced, but he's forced to live with his wife and kids because he can't afford alimony. And number two, he is constantly afraid that his kids are going to be sick because if his two daughters get sick, he feels that he's going to go into financial bankruptcy, right? Which to me is mind-boggling. Right? Not only do you have to live with the person that you clearly don't get along with, and I kind of asked him why they broke up, and he told me it was because of money issues. So if you look at UBI, it not only will it solve a lot of these mental health issues and improve people's mental health, but it should also solve or at least help marriages and relationships, right? Money, there'll be less fights about money because that at least we have a safety net of $1,000 coming every month. So, and then along with that, healthcare. So now you have UBI, which is a safety net, and healthcare, which is also a safety net. Then at that point, you can do whatever you want. If you want to go be a farmer, If you want to like sit at home and not do anything, then go ahead, right?
Mhm.
And if most people won't, most people will want to go out work because UBI is just enough to make them stop worrying.
No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And one of the main reasons why in Canada, I think we talked about in the earlier podcast too, has more per capita innovators. People have feel comfort of taking leaps and taking risks more because they have healthcare.
Yep.
Right? How much more people have a faith in this in themselves and their system to cushion them if they ever fall, if there can be some kind of guaranteed income coming in. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what we're taking a bank on, right? We're betting on people who want to better themselves, better their situation, and giving them the comfort of knowing that if anything that if you ever do fall, you have this here for you.
Exactly. And you know, it's ironic because America wants to be the greatest country on earth, then give your people a good quality of life, and truly you will be an amazing country, right? Like I think Canada is by far one of the greatest countries on earth, and that's because
Yeah,
we have safety nets. And why wouldn't it? It's not cheating. It's basic quality of life. If you get that basic
yeah,
quality of life, you will for sure see more innovators. You'll see the economy increase more. You'll see people's quality of life increase. People will just be nicer to each other. It just makes for it's a good recipe. In theory, it makes sense. So I don't know what the hell America's always thinking of not doing this. Even for capitalism,
absolutely.
think about capitalism, right? The argument I hear is, well, because America is a capitalistic society. You know what? Even capitalism, it makes sense for all your user base to be healthy and your user base to have disposable income. If your entire user base is sick and dying and doesn't have disposable income, what business are you going to run? Right?
Yep.
So the government
Yeah.
is giving them good healthcare and UBI and great for capitalism. People will make more money. America has crony capitalism, which is like corrupt Wall Street, but that's different.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, UBI really is a case for capitalism. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we foster this kind of environment? What can we do to build an environment where we trust each other and want to take bets on each other to take innovative leaps of going and bettering ourselves? How could we pull together?
You know, I strongly believe in the pay it forward attitude, right? And one of the reasons why I set up this like LinkedIn post, Twitter post of just like people reaching out to me and stuff is that I believe that if I were to help someone else out, that will inspire them to go help someone else out, right?
Mm.
And I've been helped a lot. You know, people have taken bets on me, and I am where I am because of these people. And so I kind of take bets on other people. It's not a big waste of my time just talking to someone for 30 minutes, but that might mean you know, a successful business or a failure business for them, right? Or
Mm.
it might give them an idea. Like the person I was talking to yesterday, he had a very interesting idea, and but I kind of walked him through it, and at the end of it, we realized that this doesn't make economic sense right now, nor is society ready for this idea, and so that saved him a lot of time. And I also gave him a lot of resources on how to go and ask better questions because what he was doing was just asking his friends, "Do you think this is a good idea?" Everyone's going to tell you it's a good idea, right? Until you actually ask them the right way. And so I think as a society, we just need to kind of help each other out more. And as fluffy as it sounds, it's the truth, right? If you know I help you out, you know I'm not expecting anything back in return, but you will know that look, people help each other out. So if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, do you have 10 minutes of your time?" You'll say yes, and you'll help them out, and on and on and on.
Perfect. I absolutely agree. So yeah, let's end the podcast there. So I love that last sentiment.
Cool.
Thank you for coming on, man, and talking again about your thoughts on what's happening. Let's stick around for about 5 minutes after this, and we'll just end the debrief there.
Cool.
But for everyone who tuned in, thanks for watching, guys. Take care.